Well, thank you everybody for sticking around. I know what it's like at conference and you're a little saturated. So I am Jody Jackson, and I am honored and privileged to be an administrator in the Middletown Area School District. It's my first year, so I am 2 months on the job. I was a reading specialist for 6 years in our district. We are about, if you're not from central Pennsylvania, about 10 minutes down the road with 3 Mile Island. Very small suburban district with 3 elementaries, 1 middle school, 1 high school. All of our schools do qualify for school-wide Title I. Some are more needy than others, and we have a very diverse population and a very large group of children for whom English is not their first language, and many children who come from poverty. So I would like to introduce Kate Korsak.
Hi, I'm Kate Korsak. I'm one of the reading specialists. This is my 7th year in the district, and my 5th year as a reading specialist. I work at Reed Elementary, which is the largest of our 3 elementaries, and we'll be sharing some of the class-wide reading interventions that we are doing there. And I actually started at Kunkel, and we'll be sharing some that we did when I was over at that school as well. And this is Shelley.
Hi, my name is Shelley LaHue. I'm the intervention specialist at Middletown Area School District. This is my 25th year at Middletown, so I might as well ride it all the way home. I have been previously a reading specialist along with many other titles, but I've been in the interventionist role, or the intervention specialist role for the past 6-7 years. And I work more primarily with teachers and doing a lot of modeling and coaching and working with administration, being kind of that liaison. So very proud of our school district and happy to be here. And I would like to introduce and thank our kindergarten teacher that has come with us today, who welcomed us into her classroom to try some of these, Kristen Skalski.
My name is Kristen Skalski. I've been with Middletown Area School District for 12 years. This is my 10th year in kindergarten, and I'm very excited to be here.
And for the record, I've only been in Middletown and public education for 10 years. It's kind of a second career for me. My first career, I owned and operated an early childhood center and worked with the 0 to 5 population and families. And when I started at Middletown, when I taught kindergarten with Kristen, she was my mentor. So loved her for a long time. Okay, yep.
Okay, so for today, what we hope to do is share with you some of our experiences using a class-wide intervention. So what we have listed here on the agenda, we're going to go over the partner reading strategy that Dr. Matthew Burns, if you're familiar with him. We have an intervention we did where we took what he had and adapted it to meet the needs of some of our students that weren't quite ready for that. We also use some of the PALS, which are the peer-assisted learning strategies, and then we'll wrap up with some things to consider and key takeaways. But our goal is we want to show you some of the things that we did. So very briefly, we will give you an overview of how those interventions work, and then we'll give you a snapshot of some of the data that we saw from using those interventions. So the first part, we're going to go pretty quickly, just so you have some context, so you can understand the process that we use to get to build these class-wide interventions, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. Okay. So the first thing we had to do was the protocol for the partner reading strategy with Dr. Matthew Burns is you have to determine if there's a class-wide need. So what we used, what his recommendation was, you're going to use the oral reading fluency score from your universal screener, the words read correct, and you find the median score. So the median score is not the average, it's the middle score. And then you look at that middle score and you ask, is this class median of your classroom less than the benchmark goal? So here's an example of what that might look like. This was one of the classrooms that I worked with the first year that we did this. So you can see the words correct. The median score was 53, which was pretty far below the 72 benchmark that we were hoping for. So once you determine the need,
So when you look at a data set like that and we say, okay, first of all, do they qualify for a class-wide need? And we're like, yes, there are too many kids that need assistance, so we need to do something differently. The next step is to partner them up. So the protocol to do it is to order the students from lowest to highest. And for this, again, we used oral reading fluency scores. And then you split the class in half. And then we match one reader from the top half with a reader from the lower half. And we're going to show you, it's a little animated, but we're going to have a little fun. So everybody, I want you to take a look at our chart. We're starting at the top with the lowest. And if you notice, it goes down to the highest. So if you think you know the last name that goes with the first name, raise your hand. And one of my lovely friends is going to come around and give you a little treat. So who thinks they know who William is? Thank you, Pam. Sorry, we have to use the microphone or I have to repeat you. That's what we were told.
That is the one and only William Van Cleve.
You'll start to see a pattern.
Well, kiss your brain, Dr. Kastner. You get a Hershey kiss. Sorry if you're chocolated out. William Van Cleve. Who thinks they know Anita? Christina. Archer. Ding, ding, ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. How about Nancy? Oh, I love it. Hershey kiss for you. David. Yes, Victoria. Way to represent. How about Jan? Jan starts with... Yes, someone's getting a chocolate back there. How about Louisa, the one and only? Moats. Thank you. I feel like everybody gets a chocolate for that. How about Hollis? I heard it. Say it out loud. Hollis. Scarborough. Hollis Scarborough. Oh, just in time. How about Elsa? For the record, I had to get a private lesson from Dr. Kastner about how to say it. So it is Elsa.
Elsa Cardenas Hagen.
I got nervous and I punted. All right, you get 2 chocolates. How about Matt? Burns. Good job. And the last one, Linnea. Who wants to kiss their brain and get chocolate? Linnea. Linnea. Oh, Linnea Airy. Thank you. Thank you. So now, I should have asked Shelly to animate. So what we do, so let's go. So we're going to match up. If you notice, see how it's shaded? So we have readers 1 and readers 2. Thank you for participating, everyone. I know it's hard. All right, so William, if you want to hit the animation shell, William would be matched up with Louisa. So if you see, she's a stronger reader, but not so disparate that it becomes like, too different that they're not going to work well together. Anita would then be matched with Hollis. Nancy and Elsa are going to work. David and Matt are going to work together. Hopefully they behave. And then Jan and Linnea Airy would work together. So we can't help ourselves. Again, I'm a reading specialist at heart. So, all right, if you could advance us. So once you have your kids matched up, so you have a stronger reader and a lower reader, then you need to figure out what materials you're going to use. So the important part here is to use your data and to match up your materials to the level of the reader 2. So if the reader 2 can read it, the reader 1 can read it. And we want them all to be successful, and we want them to feel confident and to build competency. So we looked at a lot of different materials, and it depends on the age that you're working and the ability of the kids. So for some groups, we did it at the word and phrase level. Some we did decodable passages. Some we did grade level text. And these are some resources that we at Middletown had, but we were very flexible in our thinking and data driven. So flexible meaning, what materials do we have? What are the kids? What's their data? How can we group them? How can we match the things? So these are just some things, but you can use anything that your district has. And there's a lot of things that are open resource and free online. So again, though, you want to match to your reader 2's level. So this, if you've ever heard of Lindsay Kemeny, this is her chart that she uses. And we have all of the resources that we use embedded in the last link for you. It's all hyperlinked. But this is basically the script that you use and that you follow. So you have to organize the work. So we just did folders. Every teacher does things a little differently. But reader 1, the stronger reader, reads first. And they read out loud. And reader 2 follows along. And they give prompting, which is something that we had to take our time and really explicitly model and teach, especially to our younger learners. So Kate and Kristen will talk more about that. But, so you set a timer, reader 1 reads, then reader 2 goes back and rereads, and then they do another round where reader 1 and then reader 2. And they're doing prompting along the way. So that's what the actual reading part looks like. And after every paragraph, you stop and you do something called paragraph shrinking. And that's where you try to concisely articulate the gist of the paragraph. And this was another skill that is something you have to teach, and it does not come naturally to us. It doesn't come naturally to us, especially people who talk a lot like me, right? So you have to really think, and that helps. At first, I was nervous that that would hinder them in being able to really think, but it actually increases their ability to comprehend and think about what they're reading. So it ended up, our data will show. Okay, sorry, I'm trying not to take too much time. So these are just some examples of materials that we use to help our younger learners to be more successful. So we would model this. The hippopotamuses are really cute because that's to teach them to give wait time. So we taught the little ones to be like 1 hippopotamus, 2 and then they would give prompting or help. Because again, we wanted reader 1 to be able to attempt the word before reader 2 reader 2 to attempt it before reader 1 was always giving them the answer. So. And then this is just the graphic for paragraph shrinking, and they put 10 up because it's to remind them to try to do it in 10 words or less. All right. So this, again, a lot of our materials we used were from Lindsay Kemeny and Dr. Burns, and there are some patent recorded sessions that are wonderful from both of them, so they're all hyperlinked for you. Now, let's talk about our data, and one of my 3rd grade teachers is actually in the room. I will not point them out, but we looked at our data, we determined we needed a class-wide need, we administered it, and then this is what it shows. So 9 students that we worked with. Now, when you do it, it's only designed to be a short-term kind of like help to get kids on the right track, to reduce the number of kids who need more intensive intervention. 9 students made double-digit gains in a matter of just a couple of weeks. 11 students, when we look at typical growth, made typical growth or more on some of our reports. So if you see, we were able to turn 1 red into green, and then we were able to make some of the reds like 57, 75. They were still red, but they were much closer to grade level where they should be.
This here is a snapshot from a classroom that I was in another building. This is a 4th grade classroom. Now I do want to preface too with the teacher that I worked with in this particular classroom really bought into this process and really engaged in the process. And we saw that in the end that did make a big difference. She also asked if she could take over the planning because we helped in the beginning to get teachers started because we know how little time that they have. So once she understood the process, she asked if she could take over the planning and choose the passages for her students because she felt she knew them best and could pick the passages that worked best for them. She primarily used the ReadWorks passages. So from September to November, you can see, just looking at the big picture, yes, we had a lot of students go up in their oral reading fluency, but what really stuck out for us is look at the difference in their accuracy. Reading went way up, and so did their ability to comprehend and retell the passage after they were able to do this. Their quality went up, their ability to retell. She had so many gains, but she also used the strategy in other parts of her day. Like, she loved the paragraph shrinking, so she pulled that into small group when she worked with students. And she also prioritized this daily so that if we weren't there that day, she made sure she kept with the intervention.
So I also was lucky enough to be able to try this in some 5th grade classrooms, and for any of you that are familiar with intervention, you know the older they get, the harder it is sometimes, and the kids really loved this and gravitated towards this time of day, which is a win in and of itself. But 11 kids in this classroom made double-digit gains, and only 1 student showed less than typical growth. And what Shelley was just talking about, when you look, like, yes, it's great to see like the red go to green and this and that. And there were some kids where you see on the farthest column on the right where they actually didn't make gains. There's a lot of other sources of data that tell us that even though their oral reading fluency may not have benefited, their accuracy went up, their retail went up, and that is ultimately how we get reading comprehension. Because when you're paying attention to reading the words accurately, it may take you slightly longer, but it will ultimately bolster your comprehension. And some of the students at the very bottom, like the kids reading 150, 160 words a minute, the variability is most likely due to their background knowledge on the actual topic they were reading and less likely an actual reading ability. But we were very excited. Again, this is short term, and the teacher loved it and the kids loved it so much that they actually kept doing it long after we actually ended it, because then I started as the reading specialist pulling some of those kids and giving like more explicit small group reading intervention. They kept doing it and they found it to be wonderful.
Just to reiterate with the pathways of progress, what that considers is multiple sub-skills. So it's not just, and that's why when you see the oral reading fluency go down, their accuracy and their retail went up, which then showed that pathways track up as well. So, which like Jody said, that's what we want with our kids. Okay, so I'm really excited to talk about this one. So 2 years ago, Kate came to me and said, I saw a video on Patton's website about Tier 1 class-wide interventions. I really think you should check it out. I think you'll like it. So I finally got around to checking it out, and I was like, oh my gosh, we need to try this. But I had no idea where to start, because at that point we hadn't had any training. So we were just kind of going off of what we learned from Dr. Burns on the video. And I was able to convince a second grade teacher to let me in to try this. And it was such a wonderful experience. We were both able to be vulnerable with each other, and we had that level of trust. And I think that's really important, especially when you're starting out teaching someone how to do this. So we learned from each other as we did this. We could not do the partner intervention or the partner reading the way it was designed with Dr. Burns, because the second grade students were really struggling to read. They were struggling to get those words off the page. So we adapted our intervention, and what we came up with, we did 20 minutes every day. We started in January. We started out the lesson with a quick word chaining activity where we changed one sound, and we did word chaining for spelling. We also did word chaining for reading as a whole group. Then we went into some heart word fluency where we practiced getting those heart words, recognized automatically. Then our partner reading was only 10 minutes instead of the 20 minutes, because we spent the first 10 on the first two things. And they were reading very controlled decodable text. We even adapted some of those decodable texts to pull out skill words first for some of those students to read those skill words before they read them in the passage. So we still followed, though, that procedure for finding the partners and pairing them up with those dyads. So just to kind of give you a very quick example of what this looked like in the beginning, we made charts. This is how we practice. If you're familiar with the ECRI word reading routines, we use that for irregular words. If you noticed, there's only 4 different words on here, and they're multiple times. This is how we started with them, and each day we continued to do that with the charts. That was in January, okay? And this is what an example of our word chaining looked like. So we would start out, I would say, all right, boys and girls, let's do the word lip. Say lip, lip. Okay, what are the sounds in lip? Very good. Let's spell it. They all had a whiteboard template. We actually used the ticket holders, and we had a sheet that was in there that had the handwriting lines on it, because that's a thing. We learned so much from this, what worked and what didn't work. And so we did, the first 4 or 5 words were always for spelling, so I was only changing one sound, and then they would write it. And then the last few words were for reading, so they would put their pens down. I would say, okay, I change the L to T, what's the new word? And they would decode it together, and then we would go back and read the words. So this was an example of what our word chaining looked like in January. And so when we got to April, this teacher chose to continue this because we learned so much about her students and about what they could do. That was another misconception too, when they couldn't read, how much we could push them and having them in that text every day. So you can go, yeah, that's good. So by the end of our intervention, we did it till about the last week in April, and I think she might have done it a little bit into the first week of May. But this is how we practice our high frequency words, because the charts got too easy. Even they went through all the words from second grade, all the words from first grade. And so now, and this was a happy discovery. So we started using the students' names in the sentence and pairing it with the skills that they were learning, so you could see happy, happier, happiest. You know, anytime we noticed that there was an issue students were having, we would build that into our presentations and maybe do a quick mini lesson, maybe do some word chaining around that. So it did really change as it evolved as we did this. If I didn't have these sentences up by the time I started doing that, they were mad. They looked forward to these sentences. They were so excited to see whose name was going to be up there. They couldn't wait to see what the story was going to be. And then we would show them one sentence at a time. They would read it to themselves, read it with a partner, and then we would read it all together. Okay, so, and then this is what our word chaining looked like in the April. So you can see our spelling patterns got more complex, and their reading went from very controlled one-syllable short vowels and silent E in the beginning to they were reading books that had vowel teams, multi-syllable words, and it was so rewarding. And I think for the teacher to see how much they were able to do was pretty exciting. What? Yes, with the scaffolding. So that gradual release, right? So if you take a look, this was her data in the winter. This is when she came to me and said, I don't know what to do. And I said, oh, I just learned about something from Mrs. Korsak that I think would be perfect to try in your classroom. So as you can see, she had several kids that were reading way below. By the end of the intervention, you can see how those students moved here. She was actually able to move she had moved 4 red students into a tier above, and one of them went from red to green. She had yellow moved to green and blue. So there was such success in their growth by doing this every day. And then we can go to the next slide. This is what brought her to tears. When we looked at her pathways in the middle of the year, she was just defeated. And she's, realized like her kids weren't growing. And this is a phenomenal teacher. She, is doing a lot of the right things. We just needed to help focus it a little bit better. So when we ran her pathways at the end of the year, this is what brought her to tears. So it was pretty exciting. All right. So next is, so I'm going to turn it over now to Mrs. Korsak and Mrs. Skulsey, and they're going to talk about another type of intervention we used.
So as Shelley said, I found the Matthew Burns video randomly on the Patton website when I knew I was looking for something for intervention, and there had to be another way or something we weren't doing. So I watched his whole video. I had lots of ideas, but what stuck out is he said, I love K-PALS. You don't need to do anything else for it for kindergarten. K-PALS comes from Vanderbilt University, so I was like, let's hop on this. I got on the website. I have a spending habit when it comes to reading books and materials, so I was like, it was like $45, $50. I was like, this is like nothing if it can change my kid's test score. So I purchased it immediately. And when we then looked at our winter data, I was at this point the interventionist for Kristen's class, and I was pulling probably about 50% of her class for intervention, and I wasn't seeing the gains I had seen in previous years in her classroom. And so when her winter data came out, I kind of came to her and I was like, I have this idea. What do you think? So I'm going to pass it on to her and say her reaction to my idea that we could try.
So when Kate came to me, I was like overwhelmed as like a teacher with kindergarten students. I had major behaviors that year. If there was any year that I was going to leave teaching, it was going to be this year. But I'm so grateful that Kate had came to me with this new program that she wanted to try, and I was relieved too because we got to co-teach. So she came in, she took care of like pairing up the partners and everything, and take care of copying all of this into a folder. And let me tell you, with all the behaviors in my class, this was the most amazing 20 minutes in my classroom every single day. They were relaxed, they were engaged, and for me, half the time I would look at Kate and I'm like, oh my goodness, like, look at so-and-so. They're doing such a great job. And one of my favorite things about K-PALs is if you can see where there's a star, that's when the student actually gives a compliment to the other student. So in my classroom, I'm really big about being kind. We're kind friends, kind little humans, because a lot of them don't learn that at home. So I take that upon myself, and that's really big in my classroom. So for them to learn to give a compliment to another student was huge. And then I took this outside of just K-PALs. Like, they were giving compliments to students on the playground at recess, or like in a math lesson and everything too. And I think having students in kindergarten work with a partner, you're like, oh my goodness, they can't do that. Yes, they can. I can tell you firsthand that they did that. And just a little side note, so this year our district started spring math in my building in just K and 1. And we were given the information, and the math coach said, you do not need to start partners right away. And I was one to jump in right away, and I said, oh, I'm starting day 1 with partners, because I had the confidence from this program and with working with these amazing ladies and a lot of support from Kate that I, just jumped right in. And again, it's a favorite part of my classroom every day, is working with them. And just the data, which you'll see on the next slide, that we received from this is amazing.
And just the best part about K-PALs and their system is it is very systematic, and we slowly built them up to working together. So they knew, it was just very clear of what their expectations are and what they were needing to do. It wasn't just go in partners. So this is what our data change looked like. So you can see the middle of the year and all the red. And by the end of the year, that her class was over 50% green, which was just so exciting for us to see the success. And our decrease in the red. So I got to change schools the next year, and still loved K-PALs and the experience I had. So I brought it to the elementary school I currently work at now, and we saw when we were looking at our data that we could utilize K-PALs. We did it slightly different, and this is just to let you know that it can look different in different places. So what happened was, we have 3 reading specialists. 2 of us pulled the most at-risk students from K-PALs. And I'll be honest, I don't think our most at-risk grew as much as those middle to the higher reds. So we pulled them out. We then combined 2 classes and a reading specialist all worked together to do this intervention. I think it ended up being about 28 to 30 kids in one classroom, but you had 3 adults, and it was really successful from the teacher's perspective and the reading specialist. The teachers really enjoyed that chance to get to co-teach together, and our data really shows a huge change. So this was classroom A, because like I said, we combined 2 classrooms. Classroom A, you can see the middle of the year. February is when we started the intervention and what the end of the year data looks like. Another thing to note was, when I worked with Kristen, we were using an okay Tier 1 reading program. We changed in kindergarten to an evidence-based phonics reading program, and that has made a major impact. So that, combined with K-PALs, really helped move our data. So, and then Class B, there was a lot of yellow, and when we switched it in the spring, you can see she lost all red, and was able to move her greens and yellows. So we were really thrilled. And the best part on the next slide is we ended the kindergarten year good, and this school year, this is the other first grade. But we did that one. This is the end of kindergarten, and just showing you over the school years, I just wanted to explain that each bar is a different year of kindergarten. So it's going back to 2000. The green bar would be 2019. There's no green on the end due to COVID. And then you can see each year at the elementary school and the difference of that light orange bar where we ended that school year. And I don't think we did the slide to this, but they held it. I have the lowest amount of first grade intervention students that I have ever seen. And usually first grade is the monster of intervention. So it was really successful. We also, because I bought K-PALs in first grade, and I thought this was so great. I'm going to go buy in kindergarten, I'm going to buy the first grade one too. In the first grade one, they actually, if you read the book, they do partner reading as well. We took this out, and in the second half of first grade, we identified 3 of our 4 classes could benefit from it. Each class got a reading specialist. We made these nice little slideshows for the teacher. And then we went down, we partnered these kids the same way you're partnering your ORF kids. We would be using composite scores more in first and kindergarten than we're using oral reading fluency. Sometimes in first grade, I'll also use whole words read. It'll just depend on what the data looks like. They would do 1 minute of doing the letter sounds, and again, the complements were still there. Then they practiced for a minute each partner blending the words. They got some nice high-frequency word practice, which was fantastic for them. And then they do a really short, semi-decodable passage. This one doesn't have it. Some of these passages would have what they call rocket words, and if I believe the prior passage, the word new, they would have considered a rocket word, and the teacher would have told them and taught them the word new, and then it will show up in like next passages. And it kind of gave them an opportunity to really practice that oral reading fluency in an appropriate way in first grade. And our teachers loved it. They did it even when we couldn't make it. So our whole words read really increased. Having that extra time in text and in reading really helped. So you can see again, the orange was last school year, and the amount of kids at the end of the year being able to hit that whole words read. And it held out though till second grade. And that is the biggest increase, is that not only were they able to do it at the end of first grade, they all went, and the goal is exactly the same if you're familiar with Acadians at the end of first grade as it is in the beginning of second grade. And they were able to hold on to it, if not increase it a little bit over the summer. So, passing it off for some things to consider.
And just a couple things to consider. How are we on time? Let's see. Okay, a couple minutes. All right, we'll go through this quickly, and then we'll have some time for questions. So classroom management is a big thing. If there is a teacher struggling with management of the classroom, that may make some of the procedures more difficult. So it's something to consider ahead of time, like how can you support the teacher with that, and how can we help strengthen that so that the intervention can be successful. Teacher buy-in and support. We helped them as much as we could by preparing a lot of the materials and getting them started. And as they saw the success, they wanted to take over. The behaviors with the dyads, that one I shared with you about second grade, boy, did we learn the hard way the first time. It's not always going to work. And so we had to adjust as we went, and that's okay. We found there were kids that just had no business being a coach. And we found kids that did better as a coach, even though they were technically on the lower end of the reading. So, but we watched them very carefully, and we also watched the materials they used very carefully. But it was a constant problem-solving process. But when you're working together with the teacher and having those conversations and reflecting daily, it can make, I would suggest, don't give up. Like, continue to find ways to problem solve because it is so worth it. Also considering your lowest readers or your non-readers, in some situations it worked better to pull them out because they really didn't benefit from this type of intervention, where in other areas, with the second grade classroom, we were able to train fifth grade students to come and work with them because we found that their partners or their coach in second grade, they did a great job for so long, and then, you can only read so much CBC. And so we were able to reach out to fifth grade and get some really good students to work with them, train them how to do it, and the kids were so excited to be able to work with them. So again, another way to problem solve. Also thinking about materials, using what you have, scaffolding where you can or need to, and remembering that gradual release. And you also don't want them in the same materials. The goal is to continue to move them as they are ready. We want to move as fast as we can, but as slow as we must. That's right. And then finally, we had some things come out of this. You can go ahead and switch it. That we didn't really expect. Like, these were kind of our happy surprises. We didn't realize how much of a coaching opportunity that this was, working with the teacher, and we both learned from each other. It really strengthened and developed our relationships with our teachers as well, but helped them get to know even more about their students. So yeah, it was an incredible coaching opportunity for the teachers. Also, they really blew us away with their transference of the strategies. They were coming to us and saying, hey, I used that strategy. They were already in partners. I used it in social studies today. I used it in math class today. So it had applications over multiple contexts, but the fact that they figured out where to use it and when, it was very exciting. And we found that the summarizing strategy did lead to gains in the retail and the Acadians. Reason we put that on there, we weren't sure in the beginning having them really synthesize that information and get it to 10 words if that would affect their retail later, but it didn't. It made them think more about the text and be able to talk more about the text when it came to those assessments. And finally, we had that teachers recognize the value of devoting that time daily to the students engaging in text. And I'm going to ask Kate to talk just a little bit more about that piece.
I realized that, especially in our 3rd through 5th grades, that our kids weren't reading orally. We were giving kids text and expecting them to all go back, especially in like those guided reading rooms, to go back and read the text by themselves. And the problem is, if a kid's reading a text wrong out loud, when they read it in their head, they're still going to be reading it wrong. You're just not going to know. So this showed teachers that we need to be, actually I've read research that I think up to 6th to 8th grade, kids should be reading text orally. And this was great because they were reading text orally and they were getting feedback from a partner. So if they missed a word or skipped a little word, the partner was telling them it was wrong. So they were getting feedback to be able to continue to improve their oral reading, which then will lead to better silent reading in their head and higher their comprehension. So just seeing how important it is that our kids spend lots and lots of time reading. It's not about the worksheets or the practice, but about the time they're spending in text to improve reading.
Well, the only thing I would like to add is that the whole way from beginning to end, I hope you're able to recognize how flexible our thinking was, so that we were flexible in how we grouped kids, we were flexible in the materials we used, but we were always centered on data and frequent progress monitoring to see how our instruction was impacting their learning. And I just want to say, from someone who benefited so greatly from all the wonderful professional development opportunities that I've had the privilege to go to as a reading specialist, but I have benefited also greatly from being in other classrooms, working with other teachers, seeing how they do things, learning with and from them. And I think teaching can be very isolating sometimes. So when Kristen was sharing how hard it is in kindergarten, especially post-COVID, with behaviors and kids who had all these problems in 0 through 5 that they never got the resources they needed, it can be lonely. And she actually was thinking about leaving teaching, and I'm so thankful she didn't. But she's not alone in that. And teachers are leaving in droves. And if this is another way we can let our walls down and build relationships that will keep good people in our field doing good things for kids, I just think it just brings my heart such joy. And I am thankful to have been given many opportunities from Dr. Kastner and this team. Shelley is my original mentor in all things. And I am just so thankful that you're here today growing yourself so that you can grow kids. And feel free to reach out to us, but stay flexible in your thinking and stay in it with your heart for the kids. Anything, anyone else? Any questions? I have more Hershey Kisses. So if you ask a question, I'll tell you to kiss your brain and give you a Hershey kiss. No?